Today, we are presenting advanced warehouse management, leveraging key metrics to increase efficiencies and resiliency. We are here with Lisa Anderson, President at LMA Consulting Group, Diane Garcia, President at Lorraine Consulting and an LMA Partner, and Andrew Lansack, Solution Delivery Manager at Arbella Technologies. So without further ado, let's get started. Lisa, over to you.
All right, excellent. Well, today we were going to talk about warehousing, advanced warehousing concepts, and what's happened with COVID. So let's start by talking about our COVID impacts and what that's going to mean in terms of creating our next normal, because by no means are we going back to normal. So when COVID hit, clearly we had an unprecedented volatility of demand. So we saw clients that their volume dropped off to near zero overnight. They weren't considered an essential business, and people weren't purchasing their products. On the other hand, we also had clients that had, they could not keep up with the volume, and they were typically certainly PPE type folks, but also like building products types companies, because everybody was at home and looking at building out and doing home improvements. So unprecedented volatility of demand has created a definite disruption in supply is what came next. So with everybody down, if that weren't essential businesses, with our supply chain around the world, having different issues happening in different countries at different times. There were disruptions along the way. There were disruptions in transportation. Just disruptions abound, in essence. And so that also created unprecedented volatility and disruption in demand and also supply. So risks were exposed because we had accounted for risks, but really, if we had backup suppliers, let's say in China, it didn't really help because China was under lockdown. If we had, actually, there were some clients that had backup suppliers in India, still wasn't sufficient because that whole region was shut down. And so, just risks, there's a lot of risks out there and they were exposed. And all of this related to what happened in warehousing. One of the key things that happened is customer buying behavior started to change, because as we started to purchase more online, as an example, or purchase different kinds of products because companies no longer had the ones that we wanted, we thought, well, this product's not so bad. I think I'll keep buying it. And so our buying behaviors evolved beyond that. And in some cases, just new types of products became popular. And this is not just with consumers. The same thing happened in business. So that's going to be an ever-changing environment that's going to continue to happen for the foreseeable future. And one of the key pieces behind that is e-commerce, which we're going to talk to, Diane's going to talk to in a minute. And that brought upon the need for customer responsiveness and how we can adjust orders on the fly. How do we get products delivered quickly? A lot of this has been coming up over the last several years with the Amazon effect, but it's been heightened, to be sure, as the coronavirus hit. And then the importance of cash is very important. Those companies that had cash had a much better chance of staying in business and being able to accommodate their customer needs. And we were virtual overnight. So there's a lot of changes impacting us. And so let's go to the next slide.
Yeah, Lisa, like you pointed out on the e-commerce, it's just really exploded. So what we've seen with our clients, and I'm sure we can talk with it across industries, but what we've seen with our clients is that e-commerce sales is on the rise, with some of our clients, growing their e-commerce 40%, 50%, and some even dramatically as 300% with COVID at the start of March and into April and May. So very impressive increases. According to Forbes and eMarketer, the e-commerce trend is up in the US and Canada alone 129% as of April 2020. And really, the trend of e-commerce is projected to continue even post-pandemic. So it's not going away. And this last bullet point here highlights that, you know, maybe beyond the pandemic, we'll have new users or maybe low frequency users joining into the e-commerce trend as well. So very impressive numbers. Like Lisa mentioned, we have clients who were either set up and ready for this impact, or others who were working on ramping up to account for this increase.
All right, and so that really resulted in several changes to warehousing, which is the topic that we're working on today. And it's actually really heightened the need for warehousing and advanced warehousing. So the e-commerce business drove piece picking, and drop ship and piece picking has been on the rise. So one of our clients is in both the B2B and the B2C space, but they have many more B2B clients than B2C. And the dropships have raised dramatically during this process. So really what that means is that we're now in the warehouses we're sending individual pieces or individual like cases, whereas in the past we were doing pallets and you know, cases in the piece instead of pieces. So that's really had a big difference. The order volume has changed. So like one of our clients that distributes helmets and other supplies has had more than doubling of the number of orders, but that doesn't mean with the same type of volume, which really just means that, you know, this drop ship and e-commerce has really increased quite a bit. And a lot of this is requiring flexible pick methods. So how do we do both batch and sort, as an example? And they're requiring multiple pick methods for multiple order profiles. So there's a lot of changes happening in the warehouse that we have to accommodate for efficiently, and then, you know, we'll get into the metrics associated with those. Of course, reverse logistics has been increasing pretty substantially as you know, as customer returns, and how do we return products in a sustainable way. So reverse logistics has definitely increased. Social distancing protocols, of course, have come into play, and it depends, you know, on the company. Some of them have had more trouble than others in terms of how to incorporate that into the process, depending upon, you know, what they have happening. If they're, you know, perhaps they have kit stations or something. So, you know, we've had to address that, and some folks are automating in order to avoid it. So we'll talk further about that. There's also information sharing with apps that Andrew would be able to talk further about. I don't know, Andrew, did you want to mention anything about that?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Yep, so you're talking about the mobile app capabilities?
Yep.
Yep, so there's kind of a lot of new emerging things that we've seen in the industry, and mobile capabilities have always been there in terms of the warehouse management system for pick and pack operations. One of the things we've seen with COVID is not just the inventory tracking and knowing where your inventory is, but knowing where your people are, and seeing a rise in apps for how many people are in the building, what places they're accessing, what things they're doing. You know, in a lot of our states, especially here in America and other parts of the world, there's a lot different limitations to who can be in the building and what can be in the building right now because of different regional or state protocols. And we're finding that Microsoft, for example, is producing a lot of apps to help with that for companies to track their employees as well as their inventory, because that's really important to drive business decisions when we have certain things that we're restricted from doing that we weren't 12 months ago.
Yeah, absolutely. And that relates to the next point here about technology to keep workers safe. You know, a lot of these apps that Andrew is referring to help with that, and there are others that we'll talk about further later in the presentation. But there's a significant increase in the amount of technology that companies are starting to implement when it comes to warehousing, as they're seeing that we have to find a way to accommodate all these changes with COVID, and how do we be successful in the future. There's certainly, you know, as much as I was talking about the volatility of demand and supply earlier, when we look at it from a warehousing point of view, it's been a real challenge, because how do we know if we can fit, you know, one day we may have, you know, we're bulging at the seams in the warehouse, and then the next day there's like a very, you know, we have lots of customer orders, and, you know, we have plenty of room. So it seems like there's a significant volatility when it comes to the storage utilization in the warehouses. So that's definitely something that we're having to figure out how to accommodate, and how to look at technology that may help us better predict our storage utilization. And then last but not least, there's a heightened interest in WMS, and we're going to talk about that further, because that's one of the key points and metrics that have come up. And then our first reaction to all of this happening, and our meaning like our clients, you know, the world at large, is that we went into survival gear. I mean, it's what we do, right? So we go into survival gear, we start to expedite, because certain customers are, you know, we can't possibly keep up with demand. We can't keep the products in our warehouses, and we're having to expedite to accommodate them. Whereas other customers, you know, their demand dropped off, and the opposite is true. So we're running in circles, basically. We're concerned about excess inventory, because, like I said, we have dropping demand, and one day we're worried about excess inventory. The next day we're worried about having enough inventory. So it's, you know, we vacillate greatly from day to day, it seems. We're looking at cutting costs, because the first thing that folks tend to think when everything goes wrong is, oh my gosh, I've got to do something to reduce my my costs so that I can survive. So that's what we're not recommending these reactions, but that's the reactions that have been happening. So, you know, cutting costs, and then we're hoping that business gets back to normal, and we're starting to see that that our efficiency approach to business isn't going to be sufficient. So we'll let's go on to the next slide, Diane. So one of the things that have come out about this is after COVID started, a lot of people started to do surveys and, you know, see what they thought would happen, because clearly everyone was having trouble. We were reacting like that last slide. A lot of people were running out of materials, experiencing supply chain disruptions. So McKinsey did a study, and the 2 points that I'd like to bring out on this slide that I think are relevant to warehousing and very important to warehousing are that 73% of people surveyed encountered problems in the supplier footprint that required changes in the future, which goes hand in hand with 75% faced issues in production and distribution. So that implies that we're going to have to do something different in our warehousing and distribution systems, which is going to mean that we're going to have to be more resilient and find a way to be more responsive as we move forward. And then 85% struggled with inefficient digital technologies in the supply chain. So that's significant in terms of our, you know, they're one of the reasons why the technology has really increased, and we're going to talk more about that as we move forward.
Yep. So one thing we should keep in mind, which Lisa touched on, is that we come from an efficiency mindset. We come from years and years of thinking solely cost and cost savings and cost reduction initiatives and programs, and whether it be inventory reduction or just internal operational costs. With this evolving, global supply chain changes that Lisa pointed out, really we should also be thinking about resiliency, or should we, is it efficiency versus a resilient perspective, and how do we maintain our responsiveness with customers while we continue to reduce costs? So really what we see as the commonality between efficiency and resiliency is overall just speed. We do need to be efficient. We also need to be able to be responsive and recover quickly. But really what we need to keep in mind here between the two of them is just how quickly we can do both, and speed is the bottom line. So the way we see it is that really, how do we create the and for our next normal beyond the pandemic, beyond this disruption and these disruptive patterns? So how can we focus on internally and externally? How do we maintain, how do we absorb and bring on automation while also maintaining our adaptability in the process, especially as time evolves and things continue to change, and we will need to be adaptable. So Lisa will talk a little bit more about how clients, how she's working with clients to create a path forward to the end. But really what we're seeing is we really need to be both efficient and resilient in this environment.
All right, so how do we create that and? So how do we become efficient and resilient? Undoubtedly, the clients that have been more successful over the long run, and that we're seeing separate themselves from the pack currently, are the ones that are finding this and. They are not losing their ability to reduce costs and be smart, be prudent, if you will. At the same time, though, it's not all about cost reduction. You cannot cost cut your way to success. So you have the how do we be responsive and resilient and grow our business? That's really quite critical. So the path forward to and, as it relates to warehousing and distribution, is one is going to be the utilization of WMS. WMS has gotten to be extremely popular. So that's warehouse management system. It's a software that you utilize to help you run your warehouse in an efficient and a resilient way. We're going to talk a lot more about the specifics of WMS in an upcoming slide, so I won't go into it greatly, but the bottom line of it is, how do we become more efficient without having to do anything like Herculean here? We can just utilize software to support our activities and figure out how to be more responsive to our customers. We're also seeing an advanced use of ERP, so the system that we utilize that connects with WMS. How do we utilize that better to help us in our respond to these e-commerce changes that have been happening, and how does that work well with WMS? Well, we're definitely seeing folks utilizing ERP further, and there's definitely room to explore there. Real-time integration with B2B, B2C, for sure. So like this is the e-commerce, so we're on the business side. The B2B, it tends to be more the drop ship pieces, and when you have portals in place. And so that's definitely another path forward to the plan. And then there's big data and predictive analytics, which are going forward in a If there's one topic that is across the board popular, in preparation for this webinar, I interviewed multiple distribution leaders and asked them what they really needed to be successful and what they were seeing happen. And big data and predictive analytics came up in multiple formats. So it's definitely one of the pieces that's going to be important for moving forward. And there's quite a bit. I think Diane's going to talk to that on a future slide. And then there's deploying advanced technologies, rapid warehouse redesign. For sure, if you think about this, if we have e-commerce increasing by, I think Diane was talking about statistics like 129%. Well, we had a customer that had their e-commerce increased like 300% during this time. I mean, that's a big number. And it's of course depending upon where did you start? But as compared to their overall business, it increased quite significantly. So it now leads to, how do we design our warehouse so that we can accommodate both an e-commerce type of picking and packing and packaging type process versus the regular process that we send to, maybe our distribution customers. So that's definitely requiring some warehouse redesigns. As the McKinsey study talked about, there's re-evaluation of the network that's happening. They said that 75% of the time people are realizing they need changes. That's a big deal. So it's going to change our warehouses and our warehouse design and our customer requirements. So there's quite a bit that's moving here. So we have to keep in touch with what's happening and what's changing, and then the metrics we're going to use to track our progress, which we're going to talk about further on. And then there's going to be sales inventory operations planning, which is a process to better align demand with supply. And we're going to talk further about that later because it's like a powerful technique to creating that end, to be sure. So we'll now on this page we have deploying advanced technologies. So I talked a lot about earlier what warehouses are doing. And now these are some of the technologies that they were starting to employ pre-COVID. Since COVID isn't, like COVID didn't create the whole problem by any means. COVID just accelerated the process is really what's happened across the board. And it's not even just warehousing. We work with manufacturers, distributors, warehouses, and across the board, the technologies that folks were starting to deploy, were deploying, or knew that they needed to start looking at has accelerated just greatly with COVID. So like what they needed to put in place by 2024 now needs to be in place by 2021 if they plan to be successful, which is a big, big deal. So in this case, we have, there's going to be warehouse automation. There's quite a few different ways of doing that. There's conveyor systems. It depends on how much space you have in your warehouse, but there's many ways to automate a warehouse. As I said, we're going to talk further about WMS, but there's warehouse management, there's WCS and WES, which are just components of how you attach your WMS system to your automation in the warehouse, like a conveyor, and whether or not they work together is really what those letters all mean. There's certainly drones, which sounded like craziness several years back, but for sure folks are using drones to look at to just even count inventory in hard to reach spots. So there's drones that are starting to be used. AI and machine learning, there's quite a few ways that can be incorporated into the warehouse, and I'll give an example a little bit later in this process. So that there's just a plethora of opportunities when it comes to warehouses. There's AGVs and AMRs. There's just like lots of alphabet soup opportunities here. I think I will turn it over to Diane to talk a little bit about BI, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more about the rest of these.
Yeah, sure. So BI stands for Business Intelligence Tools. And to Lisa's point, we've been working with manufacturers and distributors, and just actually this year we've had a few BI selection projects. And ultimately, what our clients are looking for, or what the BI tools allow, is that it provides the organization the ability to collect their data. So data is spread across a lot of different systems, a lot of different places. So the BI place will actually house all that data, allow for analysis, whether that be slicing and dicing, or in our case, clients would like to display certain charts so they can share that information amongst their different functions. So it's a very powerful tool to display the data in standard views, and ultimately so that businesses can make informed decisions. So what perhaps maybe what are some of our metrics that we would like in a standard view for all of the organization to be able to see, and have that tool be quickly automated, quickly updated. So the BI tools are very impressive. As we went through the selection process, one of the BI tools, to Lisa's point earlier, has some AI capabilities built into the tool. So it's a great software, and it's very related into what businesses and our clients are doing today.
Yep, absolutely. And I, with that survey, the informal survey that we took of the warehouse distribution managers, it came up as the hot topic, as I said, because they really need to measure performance, which is what this webinar is, about. Back to the AGVs and AMRs, just to make sure, as I don't think I spelled it out there, but basically we're talking about automated autonomous guided vehicles and autonomous mobile robots. So there's lots of, the idea of autonomous versus automated is an interesting concept, but that could be a whole other topic for another webinar. But there's a lot of opportunities is basically the bottom line there. Then there's robotics and cobotics. So how do we work with robots and people? For sure, as we automate warehouses, there's two sides of this equation, because it does create some other issues to automate. So it's thinking through this in a smart way. It's not always best to just 100% go down the technology path without realizing the impact. So it's how do you put this together in a smart way? One of the topics that came up in the CSCMP conference was forklift telematics. So it's interesting, the more and more technology progresses, you can avoid accidents, and you can do all sorts of things by having cameras and AI working together, so you can predict, hey, you're in this dangerous position, or like actually they do this on the freight side too, is, hey, your phone shouldn't be, your phone has been, is moving. You shouldn't be looking at your phone while you're driving on the forklift, or you're driving in a truck or whatever. So there's like lots of technologies that are out there today that can, increase safety, which is one of the metrics we also are talking about. And there's certainly mobile technologies, cloud software. I mean, we're on a webinar here with Arbella. There's like lots of opportunities there, but we don't want to, like I said, we could talk about each of these topics probably for an hour each, but we won't do that. And then there's certainly wearable technology and smart warehousing, just like there's smart manufacturing. So there's like so many opportunities. We couldn't even talk about them all. With that said, though, I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, who will show us a little bit about augmented and mixed reality and IoT and e-commerce, so that how you can apply that, and in their case, perhaps with Microsoft Dynamics, and these types of concepts are taking a good foothold in distribution today. So Andrew, with that said, maybe we'll move it to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lisa. Like you said, there's a lot of advanced technologies we're seeing that maybe 12 months ago, 6 months ago, even last month for some companies seemed like a pipe dream. And I think being almost pushed into a situation of need has really seen progress in a lot of these areas. And mixed reality is this term that Microsoft has that kind of goes along with that. A lot of us are aware of or have heard of virtual reality and augmented reality. And what we're seeing is this type of thing work its way into the ERP space and work its way into WMS and IoT. And this is one example of that. I actually was fortunate enough to tell a little bit of a story here. About 2 years ago, I was on one of the Microsoft campuses and basically part of a focus group to work with the Microsoft HoloLens and how they were working with that hardware to have a software product, to have this Microsoft mixed reality and what that means for different solutions they already have. And where we're already seeing it touch the ERP space and affect production and warehousing companies is one, this picture right here is actually showing something we see with, for example, asset management. This woman is basically in a Microsoft Teams call, and one of the issues a lot of companies are going to have now is there's going to be less people in the buildings. You know, we have restrictions of who can be where doing what. Maybe we're losing some skill sets because unfortunately a lot of our industries have been hit with layoffs, and maybe we had skilled workers who were fixing machines, working in the warehouse, doing whatever, and their skill set is gone. And now a lot of times maybe if we have less people doing that, they're never going to be around at the same time. And if I'm on the shop floor and something breaks, whether that be a forklift, whether that be a production machine, or I have a question and I need to call on someone, having something like a HoloLens where they can visually see what I'm seeing and help me through a problem can be a game changer. The other thing we've seen done with this is Microsoft Dynamics 365 Remote Assist. That would be this heads-up video calling you see here where it combines with Teams. We've seen Microsoft D365 Guides where somebody can actually have a virtual operating procedure, a virtual manual essentially in a holographic picture in front of them physically while they work. They don't have to bend over and get a heavy book that logs through pictures and tells them what to do. They can actually use that with new production floor interfaces that are coming out for Dynamics 365 Finance and Operations. So really a lot of use cases coming through that we've seen using tools like this, remote inspections being a big one, knowledge sharing and training, how we train our new employees, how we share knowledge, being able to easily get that visual can be really important. Another thing we've seen with HoloLens is, Lisa mentioned rapid warehouse redesign. Well, if I need to redesign a warehouse and the machinery that's in it and I can't physically be there, something like HoloLens gives us the ability to have 3D blueprints, have a 3D mapping of our warehouse, and actually do architectural design based on schematics, which is something, that's really cool. You no longer have to physically be in the building to work on things like that. And as we go through these warehouse challenges, maybe we used to have a really big warehouse, we had to downsize and cut costs because of things like COVID. These tools can really help us mitigate the waters when we're going through those different challenges. So that's a note on mixed reality. And here now we get into IoT intelligence. People always hear about the Internet of Things. It's probably obscure to most people what actually goes on there and how can we have a connected factory. Microsoft is really big on pushing solutions and accelerators for different areas and different industries. IoT is one great way to do that. This here is an example of using the Internet of Things hub with Azure, the Internet of Things intelligence add-in for Dynamics 365, and then Dynamics 365 supply chain management itself. So what this is really showing us is how we intend to capture OEE. So operational equipment effectiveness, we need to know a lot of things. We need to know our machine status and our machine calendars, when our machine's scheduled to be running, what products are running on them, what quality things come out of that. If I damage a product, I need to capture probably reasons as to what happened. Was that an operator error? Was that a machine breakdown? And an IoT sensor on that machine can feed that breakdown metric back to the ERP to tell us that that resource is down and production is stopping. So we're looking at a lot of different things here, and that insight's going to be really valuable. It's going to give us product quality data. It's going to help us with our asset management. How do we predict machine breakdown, managing in our and those calendars with maybe production schedules? When I used to be an end user of Dynamics 12, 15 years ago, we had a lot of and-on systems that were manual, where a worker would flip a light to say either they're waiting on materials or there was a machine breakdown, and people would see that light on the shop floor and instinctively know what it means. Now using things like the Internet of Things and Azure IoT Hub and connecting our systems to our ERP software allows a lot of those visuals to come through a lot more seamlessly. It's eliminating time. We no longer have to physically be in the space to get those alerts, to have key, valuable, impactful dashboards that will drive business decisions. So when we talk about things like big data and predictive analytics, now if we are connecting all those different data points, those visuals are going to be a lot more impactful. And actually our next slide is a good example of that. So this is a visual of the Azure IoT Solution Accelerator for a connected factory. Here what we're seeing is essentially a machine itself, and we can see different colors that are showing different statuses. The one important thing to note, and I think the things that software developers and people using WMS systems have to keep in mind, is it's not only the visual, and it's not only dealing with changes of COVID, but it's also dealing with, we have to have multiple ways to show data. You know, in days where we're all pushing for inclusiveness, I've dealt in factories where people are colorblind, and maybe just that single light we see on the left-hand side where it's green, yellow, and red isn't good enough, and we have to consider the shading. So here we're considering we need to show the status in a color. Maybe we need it in a different icon. Here we're at least displaying the description of the status, right? It's not only red, it's critical. So if I have colorblind workers, I'm making sure that they're able to read our dashboards, they're able to use our information. We're presenting that data in multiple ways. We can see percentages here. We can see graph updates and how far they are along into completion when we're monitoring our OEE on this particular machine. And we have an alert section that's telling us which production lines are perhaps at risk and what their overall health and output are. So impactful visuals in WMS and production floors, make sure they're taking all those things into consideration so that the users who are using that data, it's actually relevant for them and they're not missing anything important when they're making their decisions. And next we'll talk a little bit about commerce, which Lisa and Diane have both mentioned. And COVID, as Lisa mentioned, she had one client 300% increase. Commerce is one of those ways business is changing. A lot of companies have seen that huge increase, and we need to find new ways to do business. We need to find new ways to deliver product, to talk to our customers, to get their feedback, to get their orders, whether that be in store, via call centers, via a web solution. You know, a lot of companies, especially think about things like the restaurant industry. A lot of restaurants didn't have websites before, and COVID forced them to have online ordering. Marketplaces, do you connect to other social media sites? Do you have your website also promoted through Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter? How do you keep those conversations going to capture data and deliver world-class service to those customers? Engaging those customers in all those different channels has become more important now than ever, and giving them lots of options, giving them flexibility, because right now people aren't traveling like they used to. They're not going to the stores. They're not going to all these pickup points. So making it easy on them to still have that really simple business transaction and experience is huge. And the one thing it's going to do for these companies is it's going to build loyalty, and it's going to set the expectations for their customers that they're always going to be looking for new ways to serve them through a unified commerce platform. You can respond to their every need. You know, we talk about new technologies. AI plays into this. You think about things like chatbots and virtual agents. A lot of times, especially in things like retail and warehousing, they can become really valuable for collecting data and maybe direct your customers to the right person when there's an issue, when there's a question. Having some built-in templates around, you know, what are the most common asked questions of our customers and what are the things that are happening the most, so we can gather that data and get them the right solution to their problem right away is hugely important. And doing that through a digital commerce or retail experience can really feel personalized for them, right? It removes a lot of friction from a negative purchasing experience if you give them the flexibility they need, with still allowing to be able to meet maybe the security need of your business and connecting this to your ERP platform. So global compliance and standards along with this is a huge key. And going along with that, what things happen when it comes to commerce and producing a commerce strategy and pushing some of those tools? One of the biggest things is full visibility into your entire network. As Lisa talked about a lot, there's a lot of dropship scenarios. We're seeing a lot of customers now move to third-party logistics where maybe they're not managing their inventory. That's something that's always been big in industries like pharma, where the pharmaceutical companies and manufacturers, they're not stocking the inventory themselves. They very often use third-party logistics companies to do that. But what you need to do is you need to make sure you have visibility into that inventory, and you need to make sure all your systems are talking to each other to provide the quickest updates into your inventory, into your sales channels, your purchase channels, making sure your customers are aware of the impacts on them. And distributed order management in a commerce solution can help with that. It's going to allow us to see from a centralized order management platform, where are all the points I can deliver from? Are there point of sale stores that the customer can pick that up from? Are there drop ship warehouses that can deliver that directly to that customer door, or maybe even drop it to that point of sale store that they're nearest to? I want to see the impacts of that order fulfillment process from both impact on cost. Is it minimizing freight costs? Is it minimizing inventory stocking costs in those stores? Is it adding to that because maybe the increase in lead time to drop ship it or something like that? I get a full picture of that from a distributed order management system. Lead time, I get it from a cost standpoint, I get it from the impact to the customer and to myself. And when we have that solution in place in retail and POS, in WMS as well, you know, if I, from a WMS point of view, need to see what's at my 3PLs, we're going to improve customer satisfaction and keep them really happy because of the various options they have to reduce their costs and to reduce their ship times, whichever one is most important for them.
All right. So as we've been talking about throughout this webinar, this is a breakout of some of the WMS software capabilities. I'm not going to go through all these because we could spend another hour doing that. But basically, the idea here is that the WMS softwares are capable of all of these. It depends on which one. Microsoft Dynamics has lots of the basic and intermediate, and there's some crossover here where you can get towards advanced. But in essence, all warehouses, or I should say the warehouses that are going to be most successful going forward, are going to pick out the ones of the software capabilities here that are going to provide them with meaningful progress. So should we do all of these? No, by no means should we really be doing all of these. What we should do, though, is look at what's really going to result in us being more efficient and responsive simultaneously, which may not mean that we want to do some of the concepts that might be seen as advanced, but they aren't what works in our case. So it really takes doing an assessment and understanding what you're trying to accomplish from a outcome. Like, what kind of outcomes are you really looking for in your warehouse? what kind of a, what is your storage capacity of your warehouse? Can you go high? Can you not go high? Do you have kitting or packaging needs? So you have to evaluate the whole, the entire, you look at it from the high level point of view, and then you say, okay, now that I understand what it is that I'm set up to do, for sure some pieces of WMS are going to help you. There's no doubt about that. It's just which ones. So once you do an analysis and understand what it is that will really drive results, then it's picking out those features that will really drive improvement for you. And of course, there's going to be somewhere along the line thought about, return on investment and what it is that you should invest in making some of this work. But nevertheless, we thought we'd lay some of this out there. So like if you want to do zone picking, which can definitely achieve some efficiencies in the warehouse. You want to do cross-docking. These are definitely some of the capabilities that can provide some advantages beyond the basics, which, doing barcoding in some cases can be quite helpful to some clients that don't, are doing it all manually today. So it just depends on where you stand and what makes the most sense for you to do. Not everyone needs to utilize conveyors, especially if they don't have a warehouse that has a lot of space, or pick to light. It just depends on the needs. So we thought we'd lay out a few of these capabilities for you to see. And then I think, Diane, we may as well keep going, because we want to make sure we get to the metrics. So okay, Diane, I think you're gonna take it forward with the customer service metrics, and then we'll feed in from there.
Yeah, perfect. So Lisa's point, with our clients, really what the key metrics, although this doesn't include everything, we definitely wanted to put the ones we're seeing across multiple clients, across multiple industries. So the first and foremost would be the on-time in full or on-time delivery service metrics, and how successful are we at meeting our customers' needs, and how is our fill rate measured with our deliveries. Another key metric, which has become even more vital with the COVID impact and the environment that Lisa was laying out and Andrew was talking to, is lead times, and how do we, maybe our lead times have increased. How do we continue to tighten up those lead times? So measuring what you currently are seeing and then trying to do the improvements is very critical for our clients. And also another key one here is the accuracy in the order fulfillment process. So how accurate are we at what we pick and what we pack and what we ship out of the warehouse? We also will be looking at the overall cycle time from the time the order is received to processed and shipped out to the customer and into their hands. We also have metrics around the perfect order. And then lastly here, again, not the only metrics related on the customer service end of things, but the inventory availability, because we do want to make sure we have the things we need when we have customer orders arrived, and we can pick what we need off the shelf and send it out. So I'll move on to the next slide here, Lisa, and you can take over on. Okay.
From an efficiency standpoint, one of the metrics that are most typically used that are meaningful are throughput, meaning something like units per hour, or there's different ways to measure this. That's just one way, but it's some kind of like how much are you getting through a certain area within what period of time. Of course, it has to be with quality coming out the other side. And I would just caution everybody that, remember, I've seen many clients get so carried away with efficiency that they forget that they aren't responsive. So you have to consider this whole situation with an and. Like, how do we achieve the customer side and the efficiency side, and how do we put this together into meaningful priorities? But with that said, it's a good idea to have metrics aligned, and then metrics that will look at efficiency. And then it's just a matter of picking out those key metrics out of all of these metrics that we're going to show you. I just want to point this out, that the clients, that if anyone was to put all of these metrics together and track them, they might think it's cool to have such great information, but most likely you won't be as successful as somebody who understands all the metrics and then says, you know what, in our business, these 5 metrics or whatever are the most critical. We have, like, this is how we measure our customers, this is how we measure our efficiency, this is how we measure our sustainability, etc. So anyway, I just throw that out there because it's really quite important that you don't get so carried away with metrics that you lose the meaning behind it. So anyway, so throughput, we have unloading, put away, pick, pack, repack, kitting, shipping. There's like lots of different processes. We've been working on a 3PL analysis recently that relates to e-commerce and some full pallet shipping, and it's that's how 3PLs look at this as well, is, you know, all of these different processes, and that's what makes the whole thing so complicated when you have both a piece operation as well as like a pallet or a case operation, because they're very, very different. Because you might be looking at it per piece versus per case versus per pallet, and there's just like it makes the whole thing very complicated to come out with a bottom line that you know is moving forward instead of backwards. There's no, you know, it's very hard to decipher. So it's important to get the right metrics here. Inventory accuracy, dock load to load time, labor efficiencies. There's going to be, you know, lots of topics there. And so Andrew has put together some screenshots that we have here, and I'll as we get through the cost metrics, I'll have him like mention a few things, but we want to make sure we get, you know, keep this process moving. So we have, when you look at costs, we have, like I said, the per piece, per order, etc. is very important, but you're looking at all the different types of costs that you would have in the warehouse, from labor costs to shrink, inventory, waste, cost per, you know, defects per million. There's lots of ways that you should look at all this. And as I said, do not capture all of these with equal priority, because you will. I've yet to see a successful client that did that, but that doesn't mean you wouldn't have an understanding of how you're performing and then like prioritize these metrics. So emphasize that point again. And Andrew, is there anything brief that you wanted to say about these, you know, the fact that the system can help them track these metrics?
Yeah, no, I think what you said, you know, the main important thing is making sure that you're capturing the right metrics for you, right? You can set up labor standards and things like that, but it might not be consistent across the board as far as it, you know, I did 20 outbound picks today, but between them, the variety of weightage or pallets versus piece parts was very different. And maybe that average pick time is, you know, quite skewed by that. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. You know, the system's going to help us look at things like the on-time delivery in full that Diane mentioned as well, and those metrics are going to help you make better decisions. I think that's the main thing. Is it's not necessarily the end-all be-all, but capturing those metrics and producing dashboards can help you make better decisions and make better metrics going forward to maintain your competitive advantage. Absolutely,
that's excellent. All right, so then we have, I think the next slide is other metrics, including one of the topics that's coming up more and more is sustainability. I mean, really, you just have to read the news. So, you know, there's lots, as I was doing the survey of distribution and warehouse managers, the ones that especially worked for larger corporations, of course, is not surprising, but they're starting to see more and more metrics come down the pipe, if you will, for sustainability. So just keep that in mind. Now, I've also seen smaller companies, and when I was a vice president of operations and supply chain, we had some sustainability type metrics in place, but they were really, you know, it's more of like a win-win. They're always a win-win, but it depends on your point of view. So like the smaller companies might be seeing it as, we want to reduce our waste. which is a great goal, but it also happens to be a sustainable one as well. So it's, we're titling them here as sustainability, but nevertheless, they also reduce cost, and done well, they'll be good for the customer as well. So anyway, so there's sustainability, there's certainly safety, compliance. Certainly now there's COVID and compliance metrics that we have to account for. And as Andrew said earlier, there's some apps and other technologies that'll support that. So I think, Diane, let's go on to the next one. So from a sales inventory operations planning point of view, there's better aligning demand with supply. And we really, this is for sure another hour presentation, so we won't go into a lot of detail, but what we can tell you is that when you're looking at storage capacity and how do you better predict demand, which is going to help you run a much more efficient warehouse and customer responsive warehouse, sales inventory operations planning is probably the best way to make sure that you better predict demand, and then you can align supply in a profitable manner. So this is what this is showing us, and there's some inventory, by doing the two, it helps you predict your inventory, and some of the inventory metrics we've been talking about are listed here as well. And I think, Diane, let's go on, and then you can always talk to some of this. So I will tell you that there's this Hackett study, and from a SIOP point of view, it shows you the improvements here, which are pretty profound, really. And what we've seen working with clients is that these absolutely have come true. I've seen all of them, and even better results than this consistently occur when folks follow this process. Now, like everything else we've been talking about, following anything as a methodology itself is not going to work. It's how you go about implementing it. And so it's different in each client, but the concept of aligning demand with supply and gaining collaboration among the sales, operations, R&D, those types of things, stay the same. So Diane, do you have anything brief you'd like to add on the SIOP side of?
Yeah, I'll just add to your point. We've worked with several clients on implementing a SIOP process or an S&OP process, and no matter the client, no matter the size of the business, it's always a major improvement in their process, just getting all the different functions collaborating on a routine basis. And to your point, we see these impressive statistics, and even more so. And the most recent one that comes to mind is around lead times and inventory reduction. So it's just a great process to get everyone on the same page.
Great, yeah, absolutely. And there's many of the same metrics we've been talking about relate to this. And so one of the key areas, and so Andrew, if you would like to talk for a second here about forecasting, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so you guys both mentioned it's kind of this huge driver of a lot of things, right? And predictive analytics we've talked about. We talked about reducing carrying costs, and one of the things that's always been a struggle for companies in the ERP space has been knowing what that S&OP process should be and predicting demand and supply. So where we've seen forecasting really move in the past couple of years, there's two tools we've seen that have both really been mentioned already during this call. BI, using a BI strategy to help analyze forecast data versus actual transactional data can be really impactful, and seeing the visuals to compare those, right? Not just having raw data, but actual visuals that compare historical demand and forecast graphically. The other piece is machine learning. D365 has a new forecasting package that used to be SQL Server analysis services in previous versions that's now based out of Azure Machine Learning, which means that not only do we have some industry standard statistical measures that companies are used to, but also companies can implement and produce their own if they have coders who know things like Python and R code and using Azure Machine Learning in a pretty familiar platform. So I think that really kind of brings it around with all of those things you guys have mentioned. We're talking about analytics, we're talking about new tools and new technologies and helping reduce cost to have both better operations and happier customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the point about the AI getting it's integrated in a lot of these concepts, and certainly in forecasting and BI, like you said. So I think that's it's really some of the differentiators that the informal survey brought up. So I think it's a great place to wrap this up. For more information on these topics, we've written some ebooks that could provide some some ideas here on how do you future-proof manufacturing and supply chain post COVID-19. There is and it goes into all aspects of your company from beginning to end. So if you'd like more information on that, feel free. There's a free download here. And then also Diana and I both contributed to this white paper on why the strategic supply chain matters. And it's going to be the first of a series. And it talks a lot about, what's happened in supply chain, where we've come from and where it's going, and how that relates. And it's going to touch upon warehousing. So it's also a free download. So feel free to download either of these books. Yep. So with that said, I think we'll turn it over to see if there are any questions, and we'll wrap from there.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I know we're past the hour, but we'll address a few questions that we have here. The first question is asking, what are some best practices for warehouse management solutions that you see with your clients?
So one of the things that we've seen most frequently is undoubtedly that they're starting to utilize additional aspects of WMS. So if they were completely manual, we're looking at how do we do some of the simple processes like create a better flow and barcoding, etc. If they're at the basic stage, we're looking at what WMS capabilities will help them become more efficient in picking and packing and those types of capabilities, and that also relate to customer responsiveness. And if they're already pretty advanced, they're looking at what advanced pieces of WMS will help them. I'd say WMS overall is number one of what's coming up. And a lot of those pieces we were talking about, and Andrew described really well here, as far as AI, IoT, and a lot of the fun concepts folks talk about, they're related to and integrated into WMS. At least the capabilities we described, they're all going to become one thing, if you will, with WMS at the center. So I'd say that's the 80-20 between the WMS and then making sure that you, from a metric standpoint, we do what Andrew, Diane, and I have been talking about, where you look at what's going to be meaningful and how do you implement the right metrics that will drive your business forward.
Very good. And what are some of the common pitfalls that clients fall into with WMS?
Well, they definitely get into where the system drives them to do certain activities in a certain order that may not result in the most efficient path forward. So, like it looks like it'll be efficient, but that's why I say, take a step back, do your assessment to understand what's really going to be meaningful. Sometimes it seems really cool, and it does seem like it's going to provide you with, it's going to help you be more efficient and successful if you implement whatever the latest and greatest technology everyone's talking about. However, that's not really what happens. So it's taking the step back to figure out what it is that's really going to provide meaningful benefit to you, and then thinking through how it's going to apply in your situation. Because even if it provided all of your neighbors, if you will, your neighboring distribution centers with benefit, doesn't mean that it's going to provide you with benefit, because you may have a different customer requirements, you may have a different layout, you may have different storage, you may have different technical capabilities. So it's looking at your situation and coming up with a plan is what I would say is one of the biggest issues. And Andrew, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, because you see folks going down the implementation path all the time.
Yeah, I think, it's a good point, is really taking a step back. In a good example, I guess, of what you were talking about is a lot of times when we're setting things up like directive strategies in a WMS system, people are like, oh yeah, go alphanumerically by location. And then it turns out that their warehouse aisles are where, all the front of the racks are the A1, B1, et cetera. And those might be 2 feet apart, right? It's across the aisle, 50 the aisle, which is a straight. And I have items in all 3 of those locations. It's going to say go A1, A50, and back to B1, when the most efficient process for my worker is go A1, B1, A50. So matching your physical layout and what works for your business and operations to the tools and the metrics you're capturing is really important. Sometimes you need something like a heat map to point out that you're driving people to an aisle where a forklift can't fit, and they have to stop mid-operation to go get those items, when you could instead of save those all to the end with your WMS strategy. So things like that, I think, are key. Having not just thinking about the system, but thinking about your real warehouse and how it needs to run.
All right, excellent. Is there any other questions that we have, or?
Very good. I think that's all the time we have for today.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Lisa, Diane, and Andrew, for presenting, and everyone else for joining this presentation.